Hello, and welcome to this video from Mind Pilots. In this video, I'm going to be explaining the basic components of the structural functionalist paradigm. It's one of the major lenses used in sociology to analyze society and social interactions. But before we jump into that, here's a little bit of background about me. My name's Rod Price, and I've worked in human services for over 20 years. I spent about 8 years doing crisis work, another 12 years in addiction counseling, and another 4 or 5 years providing direct mental health treatment. I teach social sciences at a college near where I live, and I have a PhD in multidisciplinary human services. I'm completely fascinated with the study of human behavior, whether it's through the wide lens of fields like sociology and anthropology, or the more individually focused fields of psychology, coaching, or counseling. So anyway, with that, let's move on to an overview of what structural functionalism is. So the structural functionalist paradigm is one of the three major tools sociologists use to analyze society. The other two are conflict theory and symbolic interactionism, which we'll be talking about in another video, but for now we'll focus on structural functionalism. So Talcott Parsons is often credited with formalizing the concept of structural functionalism in the mid-20th century. However, the concepts underlying the theory can really be traced back to the 19th century biologist Herbert Spencer. Spencer noted that there were similarities between the functioning of a biological organism and the functioning of society. So from his perspective, society can really be thought of almost as if it's a living creature, with all the parts working together to ensure the survival and well-being of the overall society. Later on, sociologists like Durkheim and Radcliffe Brown expanded on that idea, and the ideas underlying structural functionalism became really prominent in the mid-20th century with Talcott Parsons' theory of social action. But he was really building on a lot of prior thought that went into this conceptualization of society. So from a structural functionalist perspective, once again, society is structured in layers that are completely interdependent. So even though all members of society are considered within this perspective to be essential to society, we typically think of the interdependent parts in society in terms of the major social institutions, family, education, religion, government, the economy, media. Generally, all these institutions work together in harmony for the benefit of a majority of society's members. But when any of the parts aren't working properly, it can be thought of as a sickness in society, and that sickness needs to be corrected or healed. So according to structural functionalists, that's how change occurs within a society, is through adjustments that are made to address sicknesses that are noted within any of these major institutions or in society in general. So a good example of that, if the people in a society are noted to not be adequately prepared as adults to take on the tasks associated with being an adult in our society, then it might be determined that something's askew, either in the family system or maybe the educational system, or if unemployment's really high, there might be some problem within the economic institution that has to be addressed. So when these problems are noticed and actions taken, there's some new policy or some new social norm that is established that will hopefully adequately address the problem. There's no guarantees, obviously, but hopefully it will. So anyway, another good example is the eternal and ongoing argument over taxation in the United States. It's a good example of structural functionalism. In its purest form, the tax system was established by the government to support projects and programs that are supposed to be beneficial for society. Over the years, that has changed. There's been incremental changes over time that have led to a completely different tax system than what we started with in the United States. So each of the changes has also changed the nature of social interactions within society in some manner. And they've also had unintended consequences that were good for some members of society and bad for others. So that brings up another really important component of structural functionalism. Every change that's made has both intended and unintended consequences. The intended consequences are called manifest functions. The unintended consequences are called latent functions, or in the case of when they create more problems, they're dysfunctions. So they would be latent dysfunctions. So going back to the example of taxes, the manifest function of taxation is the increased availability of programs and services that are desired by the people within a society. The latent functions are related to the negative impact taxation has on the overall economy and also on the positive impact it has on creating an entire industry based on tax law and tax preparation. So from a structuralist point of view, a structural functionalist point of view, incremental changes to the tax code are preferable to major changes, as they minimize the potential for latent dysfunctions while new social norms develop around the positive functions. So obviously, this was a very simple view of the tax system. It's far more complex than I just described it, but it does make the point that every change made to heal a system in society that's perceived as being sick will inevitably result in unintended changes in society or latent functions. Sometimes they're positive, sometimes they're negative, but they will happen. It's almost inevitable. So, from a structural functionalist perspective, changes in society reflect the values, customs, and traditions of society. So when we have change, it's reflecting whatever the changing social norms are. These values, customs, and traditions, though, are the glue that holds society together, creates social cohesion. The major social institutions typically embody these values, customs, and traditions. Rapid social change is considered to be a danger to society, as it might threaten the social institutions and, as a result, have a negative impact on social cohesion. So when social norms break down rapidly, it's referred to as anomie. That's a term that was used by Emil Durkheim in the 19th century to describe a state of normlessness. From a structural functionalist point of view, when society experiences anomie, social norms, customs, and traditions begin to break down, and that's a threat to everyone in society, including the major social institutions. So, from the structural functionalist perspective, the goal of any policy changes or changes in social norms within society is to solve the problems that are identified while preserving the basic social institutions. That's best accomplished through targeted changes to policies that lead to small changes and minimize the potential for negative dysfunctions. So that's in comparison to conflict theory, which we will be discussing in another video, in which basically the goal is to overturn the social institutions. So we'll be talking about that. So that's it for this video on structural functionalism. I'll be doing some videos in the near future on conflict theory and on symbolic interaction theory, along with a few other topics that I've been considering and thinking about in the fields of psychology and politics and political philosophy. So I look forward to seeing you all there in the future. So until then, take care.
No time to stop and pray to my God. Won't you grant me some relief? Obligations and ordeals My heart, it barely feels my soul go dry, like a wind-blown autumn leaf.